Kevin Lytle covers CSU football for the Coloradoan in Fort Collins. Kevin, before we get to CSU football, a few weeks ago, CSU was mentioned in connection with moves being made by the American Athletic Conference, adding some teams because they lost some other teams and so forth. What's happened to that talk?
Yeah, it was kind of a whirlwind of things. You kind of figured the Mountain West and the AAC were going to be in a tug of war a little bit to, try and expand after, the trickle-down effect from Texas and Oklahoma. And for a minute there, it looked like Colorado State was going to be one of the teams going. Basically, the AAC courted San Diego State, Boise State, Colorado State, and Air Force to, kind of replenish after, three of their teams are now heading to the Big 12 in the near future. And, there were discussions and everything. Boise and San Diego State were the first ones to pull out, but it still looked like and sounded like, and, we were hearing a lot of chatter. There's a lot of chatter everywhere that CSU and Air Force were going to go. When that kind of got out, I think there was maybe a little, some fan backlash. It wasn't, crazy or anything, but not everyone was excited. And all the powers that be kind of decided that, a move to AAC would be, somewhat lateral at that point, and decided to stay put and stay in the Mountain West. And so that's where it's at. The Mountain West has said it will look to expand, but in the last day or two, we've also seen that the AAC is kind of snapping up a whole bunch of other teams. So it's kind of chaotic right now, but Mountain West kind of just standing pat while everyone moves at the moment.
Well, now, in a perfect world for CSU, if the Big 12 was something a move they could make, they'd probably do it, wouldn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, back in 2016, when the Big 12 kind of flirted with expansion, Colorado State was one of the teams one of the schools that was, pretty deep in the process. It kind of made the final cuts. And then obviously the Big 12 kind of said, never mind, we don't really want anyone. So that, with investment in the new stadium and everything like that, the hope and goal is certainly to get to one of those power conferences, but especially with the state of where the football program has been, there kind of haven't really been the conversation, in this latest round, where BYU and the AAC teams went to the Big 12, CSU was pretty much never mentioned as a candidate.
Well, we wanted to clear that up, so I appreciate you helping us with that. Let's talk some football here now. And the season didn't start really well for CSU with the losses to South Dakota State and Vanderbilt, but then these wins, 3 in the next 4 games, Toledo, San Jose State, which was expected to do well this year, and of course New Mexico. The loss, to me, appears to be a well-played loss to a number 5 team in the country. And how did the team and the coaches feel about that result at Iowa?
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. CSU played really well at Iowa. They were up by a touchdown at halftime, and kind of partway through the third quarter, still had Iowa on the ropes, and then kind of a quick turnover sort of flipped the game. But they played really well. Obviously Iowa, they just had the Purdue loss, but has been showing really well. And that was a really impressive game for CSU because you kind of expected, you don't really expect anyone to go into Iowa and dominate them or play with them. I should say they didn't dominate them, but it was a really good game. And it's been you said it, it's been a weird season. I mean, the first 2 weeks were terrible. South Dakota State obviously is a very good FCS team, but they just dominated CSU. And then a week later, CSU had a big lead on Vanderbilt and just collapsed and lost to that. And, a home loss to Vanderbilt obviously is not a good look. So things looked really bad. And then a road win at Toledo, a good game at Iowa, and then back-to-back Mountain West wins. And all of a sudden the vibe around Colorado State football is a lot different than it was, in the first couple weeks of the season.
What turned it around?
Well, the defense is playing exceptional, and that's been, preseason, that was the expectation that the defense would be really good. In the first 2 weeks, they just were not. They kind of got bullied, and then they made a couple minor tweaks, but really I think it's more just execution. And then the offense has been better. It's kind of one of those transitions, a coaching change transition is Adazio's second year. Mike Bobo previously had, kind of a wide open, high-flying offense. And now they're transitioning to more ground, pro-style offense. And, it was kind of ugly early on, but Todd Centeio is starting to play really well, spread the ball around. They're running the ball decent and kind of a nice mix of run and pass. So kind of just finding their identity at early those first 2 weeks. It looked like they didn't know what to do. Against South Dakota, they threw the ball almost 50 times, which wouldn't have been a surprise under Bobo, but under Adazio was kind of baffling. And they've kind of settled back into what they truly want to do, and they're doing it well right now. But it all starts with that defense. They held New Mexico to 69 yards last week. I know New Mexico's bad, but you hold anyone to 69 yards, you're doing something pretty good.
You start to look a little bit deeper at some of the individuals on this team, and I don't think it's out of line to say there's a couple of guys here, 3 or 4 maybe, who you could say are among the elite in college football at their position. And Trey McBride, the tight end, is one. Ryan Stonehouse, the punter, has unbelievable numbers. Caden Camper, the place kicker, my gosh, I think he has more field goals than anybody in the country. And then you talked about the defense, and there's a couple of guys there. Scott Patchen, I guess, is one of them. But basically, I guess fans at CSU understand how good those people are.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt Colorado State has some, star power, if you want to call it that. Trey McBride is one of the best tight ends in the country. He'll probably be, pretty deep in the Mackey Award finalists, once we get to that point. He's a guy that a couple places have had as a first-round pick, in this upcoming draft. If he's not first, he'll certainly be, I think, top 3 rounds. So he's a great tight end. Ryan Stonehouse, like you mentioned, he earned a lot of fans at Iowa. The Big Ten loves their punting, and he had a great day out there, and he's been doing that his whole career. And he's one of those you get stuck with the altitude sticker for playing up here, but he does at sea level too. Really good punter. And then Scott Patchen, he's a guy Miami transferred, just never really got much playing time down there. He's never said a ton about it, but you can tell there's some frustration that he felt he was overlooked, and he's come up to Colorado State and just been dominant defensive linemen. They have some of those stars, and those guys are playing really, really well right now. And that's certainly the backbone of the team. I mean, McBride and Patchen, I think, are pretty clearly the faces of the program.
Now, I mentioned you talked about Stonehouse and Caden Camper. Now, these are guys on special teams, and there was a point, I guess last year at some point, Coach Adazio promised our special teams are going to be much better, and boy, he has delivered on that promise.
Yeah, it's been a roller coaster in the special teams in the year and a half under Adazio. Colorado State at one point last season gave up 5 special teams touchdowns in the span of 6 quarters. It was crazy. It was a combo of some returns and a couple blocked field goals. It was crazy. I mean, I'd never seen anything like it. And this offseason, he was very adamant that, I think he said they would be electric. And for the most part, it's been true. They did give up a punt return touchdown last week, so that's something to keep an eye on, especially this week. Obviously, you guys know more than anyone, Savon Scarver is pretty amazing. So I know CSU is going to be doing some stuff to try and keep the ball out of his hands. But overall, really good. Stonehouse has been good. Thomas Panunzio has a punt return touchdown of his own this year. You mentioned Caden Camper. He's kicking. They're not happy with how many field goals he's kicking because CSU keeps stalling in the red zone. But obviously you want him to be making them, and he's been doing that. He has a 53-yarder as well on a really windy day against San Jose State. So he's really turned around because he started the season, the first 2 games, everything kind of goes. Those first 2 games were terrible. Last 4 have been good. In those first 2, Caden Camper hit 1 of 4 field goal attempts. And after that, he hit, I think it's 13 straight. So he's really turned it around. So special teams have been overall quite good.
Well, again, like us looking at the season, not knowing, because you've been there, we not understand what you know about this team, but you focus on the Iowa game and the way they played. But last week, CSU handled New Mexico, which they were expected to do probably. But my point is they handled them as well as Air Force and San Diego State did. And to me, that's a compliment, and that puts them in a different class. I think Utah State's coaches for sure are a little bit worried about the way that outcome went.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can only you can only beat who's in front of you, and they did it, and incredibly convincingly. And like I said, I know New Mexico is incredibly young. They were starting a true freshman for his first game, so I understand all that. But 69 yards against any team in modern college football offense is a pretty incredible defensive performance. So yeah, I think CSU has done what they needed to do. They're 2-0 in the Mountain West, and they've been fortunate. They faced two backup quarterbacks in those games, but they beat them. That's what they had to do. And now, the tests really come. Utah State is going to be a different challenge than they faced. They haven't really faced a team that can be explosive offensively like the Aggies can be. And then, past that, it gets into really gauntlet time with, Boise and Air Force and those teams coming pretty soon for CSU. But this is a really good chance to see if, these Rams are really, legitimately a team that can contend for the Mountain Division title.
One other question, and you mentioned his name. A lot of the offense looks like it's, working things out. How good is really Todd Centeio at quarterback?
Todd is a very interesting story. He was a Temple transfer, came in before last season, didn't play much at Temple, was a guy that was looked at as maybe more a runner, but he, one, they disagree with that. They think he can be, a true passer, and that's what he's been. He does run. He's pretty effective at it, but it's not crazy. It's not like he's carrying the ball 20 times a game, and he's really improved his game. Last year he was frankly a bad passer. He completed, I think it's 49% of his passes, which is a pretty kind of shocking number for current offenses. But he's put in a ton of work this offseason. His teammates love him. He's one of those guys that people just gravitate toward, really good leader. He actually, he's battled lupus in his life. So, a guy that's battled lupus and has come out the better side for it, he's not going to be too worried about, criticism from completion percentage or anything like that. And he's really turned it around. He's at 60% right now. He's protecting the ball, only has one interception. It's mostly short and intermediate passes. They still need to improve on the deep passing game, but he has in the last 2 weeks. So he's a guy that really every week seems a little better, and I think it's just a credit to the work he puts in.
Well, I asked that because I just look at some of the numbers early on and now, and I thought it was a fair question to ask, but it is. It appears he's getting it together. So that's Kevin Lytle, and he is the beat writer for the CSU Rams. He covers the Rams for the Coloradoan in Fort Collins, and we'll probably see you at the game, and appreciate taking some time today to fill us in on CSU football.
Absolutely. Looking forward to heading out to Logan, and thanks for having me on.